This morning I woke up and looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, I think I want a second nose piercing. Well, one question led to another until I realized that I have spent most of my life believing that if I chose one path, I might accidentally close the door on who I was meant to become. Have you ever noticed that sometimes we tell ourselves we're afraid of making the wrong decision when really we're afraid of becoming one defined version of ourselves? That's what I've spent most of my life exploring, honestly. I've spent months saying that I was, for some reason, feeling afraid to create my first sort of coaching offer because I didn't want to make the wrong move. I was so afraid that it wouldn't be the right thing for me. But it turns out I wasn't afraid of choosing the wrong thing so much as I was afraid that choosing any offer at all meant becoming that person, meant taking on a new identity where I had clear parameters and that's all people would see me as going forward. Welcome to Star Potential, the podcast for curious, soul led humans who know there's more available, who want to explore it with depth, joy, and a little play. Here, we talk about reclaiming your authentic voice, shedding old identities, and expanding into who you're becoming without taking yourself too seriously. I'm your host, Julie Jo Hughes. Let's get curious, let it be fun, and see what ignites. But that's not how identity has ever worked in my life. I have presented in many iterations. I have been a performer, a health coach, someone who worked in other people's companies. I have played various roles in various types of shows. And where I start to get the ick sometimes is when somebody meets me in a particular season of my life, and that's the only context they have, and they think I'm that thing. And for me, that is so threatening to all that I am. It's like when I was portraying Stevie Nicks in a Fleetwood Mac tribute, then people saw me as a Stevie Nicks impersonator. And now that I'm in a yacht rock band, people think of me as a yacht rocker. And to me, that's such a limited scope of all that I do. And I fear that. My family used to give me a really hard time when I was in high school because we had this board game called A&E Biography the Game or something like that. And every time we would play it as a family, and I'm the oldest child and my two younger brothers would make fun of me and laugh because at some point during that game, they would always start asking questions about like old Hollywood or current movies and things. And as somebody who was saying that I was going to go to college and study theater and that I wanted to be an actor and a performer, there were a lot of things that I didn't know about certain like periods in movie history, or I didn't know a lot about certain actors, or it was maybe I want to be a musical theater performer, but there were so many musicals that I had never watched or listened to or really didn't know anything about. So I didn't feel like a musical theater kid, but I also didn't feel like a movie buff. And I wasn't sure where I fit in. And I kept trying to put myself into the parameters of one of these boxes. And I kept finding over and over that I didn't really fit into one of those boxes. And I thought that meant there was something wrong with me. And it would always, the conclusion I always came to was, what am I going to do with my life? And my family thought this was hilarious that at like 16, 17 years old, I was having an existential crisis of, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life while playing the A&E biography game. Haha, joke's on me, right? But I took this really seriously because I felt like I needed to know my trajectory. And when you want to be in the performing arts, people often ask you the question, what are you hoping to achieve with this? And I would get really weirded out by that question because I'm like, what do you mean? There's not an end goal. I want to be a living, working performer. That's the dream. That's it. Like, I want to keep evolving, obviously, but to me, there isn't an end goal. It's not like you make a blockbuster movie and suddenly you've made it now. Like, after that movie's over, you're just in between jobs again. I could say my goal is to be on Broadway, but after that show closes, I'm just another unemployed actor like everyone else. There's not that ultimate thing that you reach that now you're good. At the end of the day, that's why we call it hashtag gig life, because a project only lasts as long as it lasts. And when it's over, it was a good, fun run, but now what's next? And you're always kind of keeping your eyes open for what the next move is. I also know about myself that I tend to outgrow opportunities. After a while, I'm itching to expand in a different direction. And I think for those of us who really enjoy continuous expansion, growth, and learning, it is threatening to our nervous system to potentially be making a step into something that now has very defined parameters. So, what I found myself examining this week was that for months I've been tossing around the idea of something that I want to do as far as working with others using my skill set that I've acquired over a lifetime of performing. And how can I turn that into working with people that are potentially not performers in the most traditional sense, but they have something they need to present in front of others. And I'm starting to work with people on this now. I'm experimenting with this business offer, but it took me months to decide to actually commit to making that experiment because this old fear came back of, if I define myself as a presence coach, a guide that helps people with some certain thing, then suddenly I become that identity. And choosing one seems like abandoning all the other possibilities. Maybe you relate to that terrifying crossroads of, if I go this way, that means I'm not going all these other ways. When I really began to examine this and to really look at this fear and stare at it and see what it was showing to me, it's kind of like looking in the mirror. It's like, what is actually true here versus what I think I'm seeing? What am I projecting versus what is actually true? What I landed upon is that expression, in any sense of the word, doesn't limit your identity, it reveals it. And that's what I love about being an actor. It's what I love about performing. Every time I get to try on a different role, even a different wig or a different costume, it reveals some other aspect that I maybe didn't even realize was there or I had never let come forth before. And sometimes you decide, hey, you know what? That's really fun. I might hang on to a bit of that in my everyday life too. It allows us to explore, and then we get to make an informed decision about what we choose to bring forward or bring to the light going forward from there. This morning, I woke up and I took some pictures of my face close up because last night I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, I think I want a second nose piercing. And I've thought about this before. And I think some asymmetrical bling could really bring a lot of fun sparkle to my face. I was questioning myself, if are we wanting to do this to bring more edge to my look? Is it because sometimes I feel such a gap between the stage Julie Joe and regular Monday morning Julie Joe that they almost feel like two different identities, two different personas? And one thing I've been kind of studying for myself is, how can I bridge this gap a little bit so that all of these versions of Julie Joe are still coming from the same hub of the wheel? Maybe a second nose piercing could help me bridge that gap. Well, one question led to another until I realized that I have spent most of my life believing that if I chose one path, I might accidentally close the door on who I was meant to become. And that fear can really keep me paralyzed from making any step, or it keeps me making lateral moves. For a long time, I liked doing crazy fun colors with my hair. But as an actor, your mentors will often tell you that that's really gonna limit you being able to get a lot of commercial roles if you have purple hair. But you know what? I never once was told that I was in the running for a job and I didn't get it because of the color of my hair. If the only thing I ever wanted to be was cast in other people's projects, then maybe that's as important as I was making it. But that was actually never my only intention for myself. I've always wanted to be lots of versions. I always wanted to allow myself to have infinite possibilities in whatever I might choose to do. I have always been the brand, but expressed through someone else's set of parameters, through someone else's show, someone else's band, someone else's company. The thing is that it's one thing to express yourself inside someone else's framework. It's another thing when suddenly you're building the framework itself. That is entrepreneurship. That is authorship. There comes a point when nobody's handing you the script anymore. And that's terrifying because suddenly you feel like the choices that you're making are defining you. Maybe the reason I felt so stuck wasn't because I couldn't figure out the purpose behind my life's work. Maybe instead it was because I thought that my next offer had to contain the entirety of my life's work. But what if it doesn't? I think that each new experiment we put ourselves into doesn't erase everything that came before it, it integrates it. Every time we allow ourselves to express in a new way, to try on something new, it allows us one more form of expression that reveals more about ourselves, and it brings all that stuff that came before it with it. It helps inform those choices. So maybe the next thing that we try, you and I, it doesn't have to define our identity. What if it's just the next truthful expression of where we are? A life that's lived to its full expression isn't discovered before you've lived it. It's discovered because you're living it. That's star potential, baby. This podcast is about learning more about ourselves in real time. I'm doing it with you, and I'm cheering you on this week as I cheer on myself as we allow ourselves to just try something and see what it reveals about what we might want to try next. Have a great week. See you next time. If something in this episode lit you up or sparked a little curiosity, you might be in the middle of a soul shift of your own. I created a free quiz called Are You in a Soul Shift? To help you explore where you are and what's opening next. Just go to juliejohughes.com/quiz or find the link in the show notes. And if you're enjoying the show, would you please leave a quick rating or review? It helps create a ripple to reach other curious souls. Until next time, stay curious and let yourself play.